All right, good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for coming. My name is Caleb Weddington. I am the president of the American Society for Biochemistry and Molecular Biology. Once a month, we host an event called the Young Adult Science Cafe, and it is a way for us to connect individuals who work in the STEM community to the individuals who aspire to work in the STEM community. You may or may not know that we are live streaming and recording this event today, so wave to the camera in the back if you'd like. Nevertheless, let's get to it. I would like to introduce Ms. Neta Lowe and Ms. Sheryl Snell-Massie. Between the two of them, they have nearly 5 decades of STEM education and STEM application experience, and so they have a lot to say. I'm sure of it. So without further ado, could you please give them a warm round of applause?
Okay, first of all, we're going to work on this 5 decades thing. Even in conjunction with somebody else, it's just not easy. But anyway, we do have plenty to say, and we thank you also for showing up tonight. We hope that we can give you an insight into this job in STEM, and Sheryl also has some extra jobs in STEM she'll talk about. I am Neta Lowe. I've been a teacher total about 15 years. I taught for 4 years and then took 16 years off to have my family and then started back. And that's actually one of the benefits, I would say, of this job, that it's a come and go, take with you kind of job, which is a big plus. Now, if you guys were really my students, I would be using this opportunity for the teachable moment, and we talk all about the weather tonight because we've got a series of low pressure system people. The winds are spinning counterclockwise. Close isobars of the heavy wind and the snow. Anyway, this is what you do when you teach. But anyway, we're going to get to some other things. I want to introduce Sheryl. She's going to tell you about her jobs in STEM.
I think I can just double fold these things instead of flipping them. Anyway, so like Neta said, my name is Sheryl Snell-Massie. I have been a teacher now for, I believe, 13 years, but for 17 years before that, I was an engineer. And as an engineer, I worked in industrial engineering, I worked in occupational ergonomics, I did safety management, I've worked for construction, for service, for the police department, I worked at OSHA for a little while. I've had a lot of jobs. A lot of jobs. I also delivered pizza for Domino's, so I need opportunity. I teach mostly physics, but I also teach chemistry. I'm also certified in earth science and biology, so I sort of bring a lot of weird stuff to my job. All right. Okay. So the National Science Teachers Association estimates that the U.S. has about 2 million public and private school jobs in teaching. A lot of us don't start out thinking that that's where we're going to end up. Like I said, I had a previous job. Most of the people in my department, we've had people who are chiropractors, we have people who were vet tech, we have people who work in biology labs. We've had people who take their job in teaching and then take it somewhere else. We now have one of my fellow teachers is now a doctor. She finished working and got her medical degree after teaching biology for a few years. So if you choose to think about going into teaching, there are always jobs, and those jobs are everywhere. If you are in mobile, you can work in either stateside, you can work in overseas. You can work in elementary school, which is about 1.6 million jobs. Those include teachers who teach more than just science. Middle school, about 50,000. Most of those are science/math. They teach both. And then in high school, we've got about 100,000 people who teach science as a main or secondary assignment. By secondary, it might mean you might teach science and math. You might teach science and special education, however it goes from there. So how do you become a teacher? Most places you have a minimum of a bachelor's degree in some field. If it's primary education, it could be, you could get an education degree. But for most of us in secondary education, you probably ended up with a degree in some science field. Like mine is in engineering. So they usually want a bachelor's, but if you don't have a master's, they're going to expect you to get it. Usually most school districts will expect you to be working towards a master's if you don't already have one. While you're working towards your master's, you'll also have other classes that they'll require you to take. Typically it takes about 4 to 6 years. It depends. Career switchers like myself can make it a lot quicker because we only have to take the education part of the classes and not the rest of it. But if you're starting from scratch, especially if you're going bachelor's to master's, 4 to 6 years. Oops, back. So the median salaries vary so much. You've got some values up there. Those things, if we work in Prince William County. If I go 2 counties south, we drop 15,000. If you go 1 county north, you can go up 20,000. The salaries range so much. So the estimate's a good idea, but it is very different depending on the market. There's typically 6%, 9% growth depending on your field. We keep having more children and more schools, so we need more teachers.
I specifically wanted to talk about this because it's something that I've thought a lot about. As Sheryl said, sometimes your schools expect you to have a master's. When I graduated, I actually intended to be a science teacher, and I got my degree in Nebraska. And I don't know what you guys know about that, but we've got cows and corn. That's what we have. We have cows and corn. So we have cows and corn in tiny little towns. So if you're a teacher in a high school in Nebraska, the chances are reasonably good you're the department. So my first year of teaching, I taught chemistry, physics, earth science, biology, general science. I was the assistant girls basketball coach and the head coach for junior high track, both boys and girls. My first year.
Oh my gosh.
I had 2 students in physics, 15 students in chemistry, but 30 students in earth science and biology. It's that kind of thing. So there really is a range for this job. And like I said, I always intended to be a science teacher, so I have kind of a weird degree. My degree is called natural science, because if you're teaching those things, you need to be certified in those things. And here, it's a lot more difficult to get that because the demand is not so high. So most science teachers here have one primary, like Sheryl said, maybe your degree's in biology, and then you add on another certificate like earth science or whatever. But it's not as common to be certified in everything here. The schools are bigger, there's not as much need, I would say. But there are still different ways to go. You can add, like I said, add to your certificate to get, maybe you want to be more valuable to your school. It's really common that you have 1 chemistry teacher, but there's 1 extra chemistry class. Somebody's got to teach it. It's better for your school if that's a certified teacher. So you might add a certificate. You might go for your master's or your doctorate, or you might do what I'm doing right now, which is trying to get national board certification. It's a pretty big process. Some states actually pay, North Carolina is a big one, they pay a percentage more for someone who's has a national board certification. That was their way to try to improve their education system. So there are a lot of things you can do once you're in the field to continue your education and improve your skills. take to be a good science teacher? It might not be exactly what you think. Yes, you need to have knowledge in the field, but a couple of the big things that you need to be able to do are connect that knowledge to your students' lives. Why do I care about low pressure systems? Well, come April, when it's tornado season, you might want to know what causes that. You might want to know the difference between a watch and a warning. It's important to make it relevant to your students. So you need to be interested and knowledgeable, but also passionate about teaching your students and just your students themselves. They need to know that you care about them. And when I was going through all of this so many years ago, there were still professors who said, they don't have to like you. They just have to do what you tell them and learn from you. And it's not really the best practice anymore. Students will do better for you if they know you care about them. So understanding your students is important. You have to be willing to work hard. This is not the 9-to-5 job where you're off all summer. Trust me. And you have to stay current, and that has to be really important to you, especially in a field like science. Some things don't change as much. Maybe if I was teaching English Lit, I wouldn't think changing quite as much as the fields of science. So I have to somehow stay current on all of these topics that are important to my classes. Let's see, children change. So when I taught for those 4 years, and that was kind of that weird. I had that first year, and my husband was a Marine, so we moved a lot. So the first year I taught in Nebraska. The second year I taught in South Carolina in a residential institute for juvenile delinquent boys. And then after that, I taught for 2 years in Pensacola, Florida. And I was 6 months pregnant when I broke up my first fight. And all the other teachers were like, no, you can't. You're not going to hit another girl. I'm like, no, that's not how it works. It's really important to understand your students. And when I came back, and my first year back, I'm into the class, I present my first lesson, and I look over and there's a kid with his head on the desk. Like, oh my gosh, this kid is sick, right? He's sick. His head is down. Oh no, he's just sleeping in class. So it's important to understand that children are different, because clearly I'm going to handle that differently now than I would have a few years ago when he would have been sick, right? So you have to keep up with those sort of things, and it's important to work collaboratively. Sheryl and I have taught different sections of the same class, and it's been a huge help for us. We can meet together and discuss what's the best way to do this. How do you do that? Because my students didn't do well on their test. What did you do that I didn't do, and maybe we can figure out a better way. That's huge. In these bigger schools, that's a huge advantage. And lastly, but not least, be patient and resourceful. You need to reach these kids when some of them could not possibly care less, or at least it seems they couldn't possibly care less. Some of these students are going home to not happy things, and doing well in school is the very least of their problems. They don't always understand that this can be their way out, and you can maybe provide some of that insight. So really being there for your students and being able to kind of dial it down a little when really all you, no, we won't say what you really want to do sometimes, but they sleep in class.
All right, so what do we teach? Small schools, big schools tend to offer slightly different curriculums. My school teaches a little bit of what you'd expect. We have biology, earth science, chemistry, physics, environmental management, geology, oceanology, astronomy. Bigger schools may have biotech programs that are, or robotics programs, or you might not only have, you have AP Bio, or you could have, in my school, we're Cambridge School, we have ACE Bio, it could be IB Bio. You might have a botany class, you might have a horticulture class. There are schools who are magnet programs in oceanography that have like classes that actually in marine biology specifically. So, you know, if you want to teach a field, you'll probably find a place that teaches that field. It's pretty much wide open out there. And even if you're teaching physics, like I teach physics, sometimes my physics turns into astronomy. Depends on what we're covering that day. Sometimes my physics turns into automobile mechanics, because if that's what it takes to get them interested in the fact that I'm showing them a thermodynamic cycle on the board, then that's what we're going to talk about. You know, reaching those kids, figuring out what makes it real to them. So if you are passionate about cellular biology, there's a school out there that will let you teach that to high school students. You might have to teach regular biology to ninth graders who don't care, but you might also get to teach cellular biology to seniors who are really looking forward to their first year in college where they can study this at a college level. All right, so what do we do during the day? Anybody have any idea what we do during the day?
Oh, come on, we can go back to school for this.
Okay, so we collaborate with other science teachers, yep.
Well, adding to that, lesson plan for the curriculum.
Oh yeah, those. I spent 2 weeks doing those this summer. During that summer off, yeah. So we do that, yeah.
I made papers.
Grade papers, we have some pictures of that, yeah.
She took my
Yeah. Grading papers, yeah, we'll go. So we spend time planning lessons and labs. Click on the here, I'll do it. I don't know where I can go here. I did.
It's not for collaboration.
So lessons and labs. This is my class actually today. Setting up science teachers, the one thing that people forget about is how much time it takes to put all the lab stuff out, fix it after the kids break it, clean up after they spill it, put it back where it belongs later. Some schools have these wonderful things called a lab technician who does that for you. I've never seen one of those. I think they're mythological because we don't have them. And click on the return. So click on the grading. This was my stack this week.
I had to grade this. It's a thing. It's a real thing.
That's handwriting.
This is a real boy. And this is actually not bad. How old is that? He's a junior in high school.
Oh
gosh.
Yes. This is normal. I had one kid that I don't have a sample of his work, but I had to use a magnifying glass to read his handwriting. It was perfect, but it was very small. And I'm like, I said, write bigger. And he's like, but
I graded his work.
the thing is, we're at a small school, so if I've had a kid, she's probably had a kid. All right. Click on the meetings and classes. These are just generic pictures because no one wants to see a picture of our meetings. No one. But this week we had our staff meeting. We have department chair meetings. We have parent-teacher meetings and parent-teacher meetings and parent-teacher meetings about the same child over and over again. Yeah, and this is, we actually teach. We teach the children sometimes. When we're not having meetings and grading their work and figuring out what we want them to do that day, sometimes we actually teach them. Oh. All right. This is a big thing. If you like data, just randomly messing with numbers. Teaching is a great job because everything has to be tracked. Not just done, but tracked. You have to keep track of, these are my unit scores. I told my kids that their mean was going the wrong way. Did really good the first test and it just kept sliding down. We have to keep track of other things like kids' behaviors, if kids are on learning plans and things like that. It takes time, sometimes more than you would like. Lastly, this is the best part about being a teacher, being there for your kids. every year I cry at graduation. And sometimes it's in happiness because some people are leaving, but mostly it's like, I can't believe that kid is gone. I teach some years core science. I haven't taught biology recently, but then chemistry. So I see these kids. I've got kids I've taught for 3 years now running. 3 years. And they graduate. They go to college. You can't go to college. You have to stay in my classroom with me. And then there's others that's like, well, so there's, things that I do. I have spent today talking to a kid about her mom, and struggles that she's been having with her mom. I've talked to kids today about, they don't know what to do. There's time to go to college. They're seniors. They've got accepted. They have no idea what they really want to do. I did that today. I also have my own class, my own kid in my class, which makes it, she also has my kid in her class because she's in physics and chemistry at the same time.
My kid is more fun than my kid was.
But, so I mean, you think about, you see us when you're learning, you see us in front of, teachers in front of the class. You see that part of what we do. You don't always see the back end side. And yeah, the back end side isn't always the most fun, although setting up labs can actually be okay. Tracking data is never really bad.
No. Okay, this is the, no really, we don't do this part. So really, we don't get to do whatever we want. The first year I taught, remember that school that had, where I taught 5 things? When I walked in their door, they said, there's books in the closet. That was my curriculum. There's a book in the closet. Do what you want. But these days, and thank goodness, because a first-year teacher is not always the best judge of what we should teach today. We have very specific curriculums in, I think, every state. And that's a good thing. And it helps us stay on track. It helps us, it helps us so that if a student comes from my class and transfers somewhere else, or if they leave our school after a complete year even, the teacher that they go to should be able to expect a certain level of skill. If they finish my oceanography class, here are the things they should know. So that's helpful. Teachers should have short work hours, and back to the first one again. And that doesn't mean just within your class, that means what class you teach. Last year, 2 years ago, our chemistry teacher had to teach freshmen earth science. He hadn't taught anything that wasn't an advanced student ever.
We laughed a little bit.
But we also helped him a lot, because that's a whole different skill set. That involves a lot of management and less content, I would say. So the short work hours, today we left right after school, and I honestly can't remember the last time I've done that. I'm always there for at least an hour, and usually there for much longer than that. And we have to arrive at 7, and I'm usually there by 6:15 or 6:30.
She is at school all the time. If anybody asks her to do anything, she says yes. This is why sometimes there's lacrosse boys in her classroom. She doesn't have anything to do with lacrosse. And I'm bad.
Yes. So there are those other duties. That lacrosse thing, my son graduated from my high school a few years ago, and he was a lacrosse player. The coach wasn't a teacher, and school gets out at 2 o'clock. So where are the boys going to go until 4 o'clock when practice starts? Their parents don't get home in time to bring them back to school. So they stayed in my room. Have you met lacrosse boys? And I had to take one home with me when it was all over. But anyway, that was yours. It was mine. And we love him. But there's a limit, and never mind. Our only duties this year, we are both the sophomore class sponsors, because we each have a child in the sophomore class. And they never want to come to the things we plan. We're very sad about it, but it's fantastic. So we'll get to plan prom next year. Yay, prom, people do know what prom's like. And then what else are we doing? Oh, and I sponsor a club.
I'm a coach.
And she's a coach of the dance team, which is always fun.
And her daughter's on my team.
Yeah,
So,
it's not as small as it sounds, actually.
Yeah.
We're a school with about 1,000 students, 9 through 12 in Prince William County, which makes it the smallest high school in the county. It's very unique in our county because it's the last holdout of a rural area, so we still have an FFA. For those of you who don't know, that's Future Farmers of America, which I'm very familiar with, but it's a little bit different clientele. So these are my people, and I understand them, but everybody doesn't. So when you get to this position, if you do, you can choose to broaden your horizons or choose your comfort zone. Think about it. And then the fact that we work alone. Like I said, here we have a lot of collaboration, which is fantastic, especially when you're a first-year teacher. That's something you want to think about. On the other hand, if you like to work alone, there wasn't anybody in my building who could second guess me on anything I did in my high school classroom because there was nobody else. So that's kind of thing.
yeah, I mean, Neta and I, even when we don't teach the same things, we tend to be collaborating because you find that person that you work well with. And that's the nice thing about schools. Sometimes you find people you can really work well with, and sometimes you find people that you have to work well with, but
That's every job.
that's every job. Oh, just get one. Oh yeah, the own classrooms. Yeah, you don't get those all the time. So you have this idea that you come in, you've got your desk, and you've got your kid's desk, and you've got your stuff. Sometimes you have a cart. You have a cart. You're a science teacher. You have a cart. So you end up hopping around from one room to another. A lot of schools have managed this pretty well with putting teacher workrooms that have our computers, and so basically the classroom is less of your office and more of just the place you do your lab, your job. I'm spoiled. I have the world's largest classroom, and I have my own prep room, and it's mine. And I don't share it. Matter of fact, the department chair tried to get me out of my room one year, and I threatened to quit, and he thought I was kidding. I wasn't kidding. That's my room. I have so much dance stuff. I'm the dance coach, so I have every dance costume ever. These are things that you don't realize you get to do. You can be a coach of anything, whether you've ever done it or not. They will let you coach it.
Beg you to coach it. I forgot to say this classroom thing. My first 4 years at our school, I was in a trailer. My trailer was on the opposite end of the building from our department, and our department was on the second floor. So I wasn't on a cart because I had a trailer, except that my labs were all on a cart. I was in a trailer with no water teaching oceanography. So you know what my water specialty was? I had buckets, and the nice janitor gave me a water key. So I could go to the spigot outside and get a bucket full of water for my lab. And then I could take the cart for earth science and put all the rocks for rock labs on a cart and bring them downstairs and out to the trailer where the first 2 years there was no path across the rocks, carry the rocks across the but I had a thermostat that I could control, so it was all worth it. It's your turn. Oh, it's my turn. I like it when it's my turn. Okay, so this is a really, really, really big deal, people. And you might not figure this out right away. Like I said, I intended to be a teacher all along. I wasn't focused on what I wanted to teach. I assumed I would stay in Nebraska and I would have to teach it all, but I wasn't really sure exactly what my favorites and all of those would be. So during my early years of student assisting during education courses, I went to the elementary school. They go, Miss Lowe, he's looking at me. He's touching me. No, this is not my age. I love them when they're mine, and they're little. When they're yours, I can visit them, but I don't want them to tell me who's looking at them. So you can, how should I phrase this? You can try to expect better behavior from high school students. You might not get it, but at least you have some expectations. So and middle school, I actually really like the middle school kids. And I like to, my first year there was the middle school was 2 people, the department for middle school. One taught the science and math and the other taught the history and English. And I would sometimes trade classrooms with the science guy, and I would do a lesson with his kids and he would do a lesson with mine. just because it's kind of fun. But there, if you don't remember middle school, it's a very unique time in a child's life, and they're a little bit crazy. So you have to accept that. And again, with where do you want to be? It's a completely different job in our building than it was where I started. That was all about planning. And sometimes this is all about grading. I've had years where I had 150 students, all in the same course. So if I design a test, I have to grade 150 of them. If I give a writing assignment, I'm grading 150 essays about the same thing. So you have to really choose what you want. And like I said, you can go to a different country and teach in a DoD school and get all kinds of new experiences, or you can go, we have a ton of teachers in our school who graduated from our school, and that's their home and they want to make it fantastic. I've always really, really loved teaching in my children's school, because why would I want to make another school better? I want my children's school and my children's friends' school to be fantastic, and I'm going to do whatever I can to add to that. So I want to be there. But other teachers don't want to have children they know outside of the building in their class. They want their life here and their job here, and that's fine too. You just have to decide what's your comfort zone. And then, because you're a science teachers are in much greater demand than other kinds of teachers. I would say though, make yourself sellable. If you want to teach a specific thing, you're a first year, when you're at some point going to be a first year teacher, give them a reason to want to hire you instead of somebody else. Well, I'm going to hire Sheryl because yes, I want a physics teacher, but if I need her to, she can teach chemistry or biology or earth science without our school taking a hit because she's not qualified. Or I'm going to hire her to teach physics, but thank God she'll coach dance, right? So give yourself a reason to be hired.
So what Neta was saying about kids that graduate from our school, I actually have three kids I've taught who teach at my school. I said I've only been teaching for, what, 13 years? I have kids back already. It is the weirdest thing in the world to now have these people who are still calling you Mrs. Massey after, you're my coworker now. It's okay. You can call me Sheryl. It's like, no, I can't. And Brentsville, I think at one point we figured out like 30% of our staff is former graduates of our high school. That's just not a thing. But if you want to work in the brightest, shiniest, fanciest places, there's brand new schools that are looking for people. If you want to work in a cool urban area, there's urban schools who are looking for people. If you want to be in the suburbs, that's great. If you want to work at a country school, if you are willing to move around, there's always an environment that you can find that'll fit you. All right. Oh, you were going to talk about this rapidly. Go ahead. My first year teaching was a little different than Neta's. I was been working for a while. I was a grown-up. Nobody thought I was a kid walking down the hall. Nobody thought that I needed a hall pass. Some of the teachers we have, seriously, the first year they're teaching, we're like, what class are you supposed to be in? Like, I'm going to be a teacher. It's like, where's your hall pass? It's like, no, seriously, I'm a teacher. Nobody ever had that problem with me. I started when I was some number higher than in my 30s. I think I was 40 when I started, but that meant that the kids related to me a little differently. My first year teaching was a lot easier than a 25-year-old first year teaching, because they push your buttons. When you're 25, especially if you are a reasonably attractive young man or woman, and those teenagers see you, they don't understand. Sometimes we watch the girls and the boys follow the teacher that they think is cute around school, and it's just easier when you have a little bit of maturity and you don't have to deal with that. But this was sort of the year. You get so excited. Oh, right, it's time. Well, there's a little dread. A little dread when you're going back. But okay, I'm going to get excited. One year, though, my favorite year was the year I came in that I was supposed to be teaching four separate preps, and they changed it on me 2 days before school started. 2 days. So I'm going to let you talk about the graphic.
So this is actually actually a real thing. There have been actual studies to show that this is a real thing. It shows the emotions of new teachers throughout the year. So you can see that you start on a real high, and very quickly you realize it's not what you thought it was going to be. And you take this huge dive into, oh my God, nobody. I will tell you that my sister is one of the smartest people I know, and she's good at absolutely everything she does. And she went back to college and became a business English teacher after she had her children, and she taught one semester at a private school and quit. At Christmas, didn't go back. And she said, Neta, nobody told me that they don't care what you want to teach them. Well, they told me that. But so then you hit this bottom in about November, and you get Christmas break. And you're like, okay, I can do this. It was just that I was tired, and it's not that, and then you come back up, and you're like, oh, the end is near, I made it, and then you start all over again. But I feel like if they would have showed me this the first year, so I didn't think that I was crazy, then it would have been a lot better, but it's true. Okay. So your first year, this year I'm actually a mentor for our new teacher in science. She isn't really a career switcher, but she's a switcher. She had intended, she's going to be a physical therapist or something like that. And then at the last minute said, decided that no, that's not what she wanted. And so she's in the process of getting her teaching certificate. And so in our county, they do a fantastic thing. They give each new teacher a mentor. So there's someone safe you can go to, because you don't want to look like you don't know your job. You need someone to go to that says, how do I get copies? This is the parent email I got. What do I say? And so that's helpful. But you're starting from zero, and that can be a daunting thing. If I ever switch schools, I have more stuff than I could ever take. Thank goodness for flash drives. I used to cart boxes of stuff. But anyway, and technology is amazing. And you guys know in STEM, you have to rely on technology. That's part of your curriculum. Students need to understand that technology supports what you do in science. Except it doesn't always work. Seriously, our county switched to Microsoft Office. They gave each student an account. They told us all to use it, but it was down all the time. So all of our stuff is on there and no internet. Yes?
I'm sorry to be ignorant, but what is STEM?
Science, technology, engineering, and math.
Yeah,
no, I got that right.
And if you want to add arts, you can do STEAM.
Yes, there you go. It really is. I tell my students, because I teach oceanography, usually. Oceanography is usually my primary subject. I usually teach 3 or 4 of those because nobody else wants them and they're fantastic. And then I have either earth science in a team format where I have half the class is special ed and I have a special ed teacher at least part of the time, or this year I have advanced chemistry. So it's kind of like that. But the oceanography kids in particular are scared of math. They're usually students who need 1 more science to graduate, and they don't have good enough math skills to take chemistry or physics, so they come to oceanography or astronomy. And so when I try to get them to do math, because you have to everywhere, I tell them that math and science are best friends, so that's why we put these things all together. There's so much crossover. And I don't know if you remember your high school year. You should all remember your high school year, such little things. But you remember there's like 5 minutes between classes? Well, you guys had 5 minutes between classes. There's always that one student who doesn't want to leave and has 10 more things to tell you. And then just when you have 1 more minute before the bell rings, that early student slides in and has to tell you something. And all you really want to do is find the restroom. Please just let me go to the restroom. Because I'm not going to have another break for 4 more hours. But it's a thing. Ooh, here's a fun one.
Yeah. The whole rest break thing also. Our lunchtime, 9:45 in the morning.
Not a lie.
9:45 in the morning is lunch. It makes it fun.
Last till 10:10, are we lucky?
Yeah. Oh yeah. If you love going out to restaurants for lunch, teaching is not your field. If you like going out to restaurants for dinner, you could probably work that in. But when we do teacher work days, the first thing is like big discussion. Where do we get to go for lunch? All right. So hats. I love these memes. They, what people think I do. So what my friends think I do. The whole deal. Yes, I never take roles. So what my parents think I do. My mom was actually a sped teacher, so she knows pretty much what I did. What my students think I do. Oh yeah, I yell at them. Usually it's, will you be quiet? I think I say that 100 times a day. What society thinks I do, yeah, I'm sleeping. What I think I do, I don't think I do that. What I really do, piles and piles of grading. So as a teacher, I'm also a counselor. I'm also a disciplinarian, although I'm not very good at that. Sometimes we're a nurse, coach, and that doesn't mean just like coaching a sport. I mean, it's trying to coach your kids into thinking they can do something. You always get that kid that just is so convinced, I don't know how to do it, I don't know how to do it. Your job is to help convince them that they can do it. Sometimes you're the parent. Even when you're not the parent, I mean, Neta and I are both the parent, but even to kids that I'm not, I had 3 kids who call me mom this year, and none of them are mine. Yes?
I heard that Nita's son was in her class. So that's
Yeah, her son was in her class. My daughter is in my class and her class. I haven't had your daughter, but she's in my dance. She's in my dance team, so.
The rule at our building, and I expect most buildings, is your child is only in your class if no one else teaches that subject. So I was the only oceanography teacher, and my son was not going to take chemistry or physics. He's an awesome kid. You guys, he's the twitchy kid. I'm good with the twitchy kids because I raised them all. But with the other students, smacking us off, smacking us off. It was very entertaining for all of us. He ducked really fast.
Mine is the opposite. Mine is the one that says to the other students, will you be quiet? And she did that in class the other day, and one of the kids across the aisle from her looked at her and go, you're just like your mom. So, let's see. Oh yeah, this is you.
Okay, it's quiz time. Yay! Who remembers about the low pressure system from the beginning? What can you tell me about a low pressure system? What can you tell me? Yes, sir.
So when a low pressure system moves in, basically means stormy weather, bad weather.
True story. Yes. Does anybody remember anything about which way the winds go? Or
counterclockwise. Counterclockwise.
See, she's the star student. So some of you remember, and you just don't want to talk out loud because this is my luck. But when I taught earth science, meteorology is one of our units, and I was teaching a high percentage of special ed students. And some of these things just don't stick for them. So standing up and lecturing, like Sheryl and I have been doing today, that doesn't work for every student. And teaching has changed a lot, and we recognize that that's not the learning style for everybody. So I wanted to just give you an idea of some of the things that we do now. So when I was teaching, and you guys, I'm sorry, you won't be able to see it, but you'll kind of, I'll do it. I'm gonna do it. It's kind of weird, but they loved it and they didn't forget. So I gave each student a piece of paper, and I saved coffee grounds for half my life. And we put coffee grounds on our piece of paper, and we spread, I'll clean it up. Oh, good. And we spread it out, and we don't worry about lessons in my room or my house. But anyway, that's another story. And so low pressure, air moves from high pressure to low pressure. So the wind is coming in, and it's going counterclockwise. So I taught them, spread your hand, turn, and close. Spread your hand, turn, and close. So they do that on their coffee grounds, and it makes a pattern. And then they take their pen, and they can do it. If it doesn't work the first time, shake your coffee and do it again. And when you're done, trace the lines your fingers made until you end up with something that looks vaguely, I just did that. I'll take care.
We can get it all.
Chemistry
Oh, that's
teachers
fine.
will take care of this. But anyway,
See, because it was red. It's because it was red.
these things happen to me a lot. Once you get something vaguely like this, you dump back your coffee and put it in your notes because that's a low pressure system. So that's just one example of how you have to do things differently depending on what students you have.
So my kids are a lot different than that. I teach physics. I expect them to understand words. They don't always, but. So one of my things is that when you're teaching physics, you're doing a lot of math. How many of you taken physics? Most everybody's taken a physics class or 2 or 20 before, yeah.
No.
I spend more time helping them with math problems and calculus than I swear I do with physics, because the physics, if you can get to math, physics is the sort of the language of physics. Math is the language of physics. If you can understand the math, if you can look at the math and see the patterns, you can understand what's going on. So I'll give them a graph, and so I have this graph. This is the velocity time graph. We see a lot of them in physics, basically the first half of the year. And there's the different kids. Some of the kids in my class are in Algebra 2, and maybe they have a C. And so for them, it's, what do you see? It's steep at first, it's curved. If I want to look at the acceleration, I'll talk to them about, where it's steeper, there's more acceleration. Where it's flatter, there's less. Then the calculus kids come in right. Great. Tangent lines, people take a derivative. And they're going, oh, now I get it. And so I'm like talking to this half of the room, and then I say, okay, now you guys don't listen. You guys, now I'm telling you how to do it. And so you're explaining the same thing like 20 different ways. If there's 20 kids in your room, there's probably 20 different ways they need to hear. The integral. So the calculus kids, I say, okay, we want to figure out how far this car has traveled. We need to do the integral of this velocity time graph. We need to figure out that area. And the other kids in my class like, what? I'm like, okay, the rest of you, let's count some boxes. So my upper level kids aren't, it's algebra-based upper level physics. So it's, Cambridge doesn't do calculus-based. And so we'll have graphs, and the grid's all gridded off. And they're like, well, can't we have the function? It's like, it's not always a function. Sometimes it's just a squiggly line we drew on a piece of paper. I mean, you might be able to discrete function it somehow or another, but, so I'm like, they now call it ace higher box counting. They are very proficient in counting the boxes on a graph, and they're very frustrated because they just want to take an integral, because they just learned it in math, and that's much better than counting the boxes. But you're doing the same thing so many different ways to try to connect it to kids. There are times that I am trying to act this graph out by walking back and forth. I have grids laid out on my floor with the origin and the positive and the negative, and I'll be running really fast this way, and then I'll slow down, and they said, I told them I've explained it to them with interpretive dance and jazz hands, and they said, no, you won't. And I said, wait a minute. So
I can't imagine why you said you wouldn't.
no, I don't know. But so, do you have questions for us? Because we can tell you what we think you should know, but that isn't necessarily what you want to know. Because I'll talk all day. Yeah.
I might have missed this, but what do you do during the summers, and are your summers paid?
Okay, so different schools pay differently. In some school districts, you will have a 10-month pay. And so basically, say, I'm just going to use 50,000 because it's an easy number to work with. Say you make 50,000 a year. Some schools will divide that up into 10 months, and you get that pay for 10 months. And then you don't get paid during the summer. Some schools will divide that up into 12 months. So you make slightly less during the year, but you have that paycheck coming in during the summer. Some people take second jobs. I volunteer at a summer camp, and I'm program manager and all around slave labor for the summer camp most of the summer. Some teachers go to class. And some people teach summer school. Some people, I don't even know. I can't even.
I mean, some just work. My brother-in-law's an athletic director in South Dakota, and he works at Home Depot in the summer because it's a job. So, and he enjoys, you know, he's Mr. Fix-It. So it also depends on your financial situation. There are people in our department who also teach at the college, at the community college, even during the school year. My first school, you had a choice. You had 3 choices for your pay. You could do the 10 months, you could do the 12 months, or you could divide it by 12, but then the last day before summer break, you could get all of your summer checks at once. So the last year I was teaching, I did that and paid off my car, and then took 16 years off.
It'd be a good way to go on a trip.
Yeah, but anyway, that doesn't happen all that often. We actually have some teachers who do the traveling with students, and that she's going with the Latin teacher to Europe and with her daughter as one of the chaperones this summer. Some teachers do that sort of thing. I try to do a lot of my professional development because it's hard for me to be out of the classroom. I always feel like I'm farther behind. I try to never ever be sick because it's too depressing to go back to the workload. But so I try to do classes and things in the summertime. It's awesome. That's another reason this area is fantastic. I've taken a lot of I've taken a lot of classes, like field trip type geology classes at the community college, which are fantastic. There are some places that have year-round school, and if I can find one, I'm going there. Because the other thing, when I was a kid and when I first started teaching, being homesick meant you had a fever or you were barfing. Those were the choices. There was nothing else. Now it's, I was sick.
My stomach is nervous. I don't want to go to school today.
Seriously, these are things. So, and we have a lot of students missing class, and I feel like that would go way down if we had year-round school and students had a break coming up. And I had a break. Yes.
What do you think about Finland's new approach?
So I don't know how new of the approach it is. I know that
What was the
London-
question?
About Finland.
Finland's
They're
new
doing away
approach.
with specific curriculum.
Yeah, they've always done a more integrated curriculum. So I had an exchange student from Ukraine last year, and one of the things they do is they do more integrated sciences. So they're doing chemistry, physics, biology all the time. It's not like in our high school where 1 year is earth science, 1 year is biology, 1 year, they do integrated. And I will say the retention is so much better. But their schools also expect them to spend more time in the seat and more time in the classroom. We would have some problems with some parents, I think, about switching to a different kind of school day. They also do less block scheduling. We're on like where I see my first block every day, then I see second, fourth, and sixth, and we're not going to talk about the other class. And then on the other day, I see first, third, fifth, and seventh. So I see them for longer times, but then you're only seeing them every other day. The class that does the best, that first block class that I see every day. I think the length of time exceeds their attention span.
Especially the freshmen. 90 minutes, people? Thank God I don't teach
I
math.
thought
Freshmen.
actually that they were shortening the day.
Shortening they are in some places, but they're also pushing back for high school, so they're starting later and going a little later in some places. Some places are doing less time in the classroom. Our school district just added 10 minutes not too long ago to accommodate for weather delays. There isn't a consistent nationwide trend here. It's not like in Finland where there is a single government basically saying this is the way it's going to be done in the country. In the States, this is the way it's in Virginia, and Prince William County is going to do it this way, which is sort of like it, but not quite the same. I think that integrated curriculum in science is always a better way to go. I mean, I teach physics and chem some years, and so it's so much easier for me when I have kids in both chemistry and physics at the same time. These kids get it. I think there's 2 kids this year that are doing that.
I think I would emphasize to you, even if you decided, I'm going to be a chemistry teacher, please get as much background as you can in every other subject. I'm a more valuable teacher because my students understand how the pieces fit together because I've taught them all and because I'm old and I've lived through lots of things. But still, you can't worry about that yet, thank goodness for you. So if you know, if you can describe something in chemistry by something they learned in biology, you have that in to hook their prior knowledge and get that concept cemented that might have been more difficult for them. So get a broad base is always better. But I think switching to that sort of thing makes it much more difficult to find qualified teachers because many teachers, especially in these more urban areas, are I'm just a biology, I'm just a chemistry, I'm just, yeah, very specialized. Yes, sir.
Have you ever had a bad encounter with a parent?
Okay, today?
Honestly, I have to say that confrontation is not my thing, so I go out of my way to avoid it, which isn't always the best approach, but it has served me well in this capacity. As a new teacher, I always felt like I made this rule and I had to hold the line and it had to be like this, and people, I'm going to borrow something from the Marine Corps, semper gumby. You just have to go with it. If a parent calls and says, I had no idea my kid's sleeping in your class every day, and now he has an F and he can't recover, I think this is completely unfair. You didn't call me and tell me he's sleeping in your class every day. Yes, you put it in the grade book for the past 3 weeks, but still, I think he should get to make it up. You know what I say? If he's willing to come after school every day and do it in front of me, sure, let him make it up. So I don't have a lot of trouble because after that, you've sort of taken the wind out of their sails. What can they say? They can say, he'll be there, or I can't bring him every day, and then it's not on you, it's on them. So winner, winner. Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, what is the demand for being a Spanish teacher or second language teacher, and how much they start the salaries?
And what?
The salaries.
That also depends. That depends on where you are. 100% depends on where you are. It's wildly different from county to county. In Virginia, the higher north you go, the more the salary is, and the farther south you go, the less it is. But that's a huge demand right now, especially if you have it in conjunction with something else. But it's just in big demand.
One of the things though about teaching salaries is it's frequently established by the counties or by the areas, so it's not like if you are a English teacher, you're going to get paid less than a science teacher. It's based on how many years you've been teaching, what levels of certifications you have, and what step your steps are.
Steps
So if you just start
So it would be the same, about the same, 50-something as a science teacher. It would depend. I think, you know, the further south and the more rural you go, the less it goes. The further north and the more urban you get, the higher it gets. But that's the sort of a cost-benefit ratio because the cost of living is also higher. So for me, I've got 2 more years before my kid graduates. Arlington and Alexandria are looking pretty good to me because I live where I can hop on the interstate and drive up, and the salaries just go up. I go out of Prince William County into Arlington, into Alexandria, and it goes up by $20,000 a year within 5 miles. I go the other way, it goes down by $15,000. So it's a matter of where there's Spanish teachers right now, and being able to speak Spanish and having that, especially with the secondary, like if you have that, I am, you know, a Spanish teacher, but I'm also a science teacher, I'm also a math teacher. You could probably write your ticket.
Well, I'm getting my bachelor's in psychology, and I'm thinking doing a master's. It is possible to do a master's in Spanish?
Yes, if you want to teach, though with a master's in Spanish, you could teach Spanish, you would still need your ed certification. Another thing, if you're getting a bachelor's in, we didn't even talk about counselors, school counselors are hugely in demand as well, because, especially that could speak a second language, because we've got a lot of kids who are trying to communicate with them and their parents, and there's this huge push for services that, like, I speak English. Sometimes I speak it well, sometimes I speak it okay. I don't speak anything else, well, math. But I haven't yet have a parent come in and start writing formulas down on the desk and try to communicate with me that way. So if I have, and I have kids in my class right now, I think, I have a couple kids, one kid that speaks, was Russian, and then I don't have a lot this year. You probably have more than I do, and a handful of kids that speak Spanish, but we have to find a way to communicate with them. The counselors have to find a way to communicate with them. So if you're in dual language and you, so a bachelor's in psychology would probably translate very easily into something in counseling as well.
And then, you know how much they study for counseling?
More than us, but they work slightly
Right,
longer.
they have a little bit longer year. They go in, I think it's 2 weeks
They don't
before
stay
we
after
do.
we do those long.
They have a few extra days that we don't have because they're working on scheduling. So for that reason, they have more pay. They come in later in the day, but I think their day is the same length. So we have to be there at 7. They don't have to be there till 8, but they stay until 3 and we're done at 2. We're not done at 2.
We're never
but,
done
you know,
at 2.
No.
Never done. But, you know,
And
so
you
there are lots
take
of options.
At home, right, papers at home. So counselors don't have to take paperwork.
No. But I had a conversation with one of the counselors just a couple of weeks ago about a particular student, because that's how you find out. If you have a student you just can't reach, sometimes they know things that can help you. And so I went to this counselor and he said, I do know. And they can't always tell you, but he said that he got an email, because counselors have to stay on the email on the weekends. I do not stay on my school email on the weekend. I have never mind. And he got a message from a different student that they felt this student was going to harm herself. And there was almost a blizzard. For Northern Virginia, it was lockdown. And he had to somehow get to school to get the contact information for the family, because he didn't know her home number, and he's required by law to contact somebody and get them over there if someone really thinks she could be hurting herself. So he said over the course of the last 4 months of school that year, he had to do that sort of thing several times because she kept threatening to hurt herself. So it is a bit of a different job than we have, because our fallback, we're required to tell you, frankly. And so I'm not going to deal directly with something like that, although they have given us a lot of extra in professional development so that we might at least begin a conversation to de-escalate something bad. And on that note, we had one year, the second or third year I was at this school, we had a suicide cluster. We had 4 students, and our school is not very big. And we've lost 1 to an accident, 1 to suicide this year in a school that big. It's a crazy thing. But
Are you high school or middle school?
High school, we have about 1,000 students for 4 grades in high school. So
Which means we're small.
yeah, that's considered small here, even though it's big. We're at Brentsville District High School in Prince William County. It's in Noakesville, just like it sounds, Noakesville. I love Noakesville. We have cows too. Yes, that's what the rest of the county calls us. Cow pie high, only we're sciencey, so we get to draw the pie. That's awesome. What else? Oh, on that note of you were speaking about ESOL and whatnot. Our county was reported in some way by somebody, and there was an investigation by the Justice Department into how we were servicing ESOL students in our county, particularly one school, but it spread to the whole district. And so every teacher in our county who might teach an ESOL student was required to have 45 hours of professional development for ESOL. We are also required to have 10 hours of gifted first aid training. What was the new thing that she was just telling us?
Oh, with emergency preparedness and then the OE,
Oh, yeah, we had to do a little online class about how to talk to students who might be having trouble.
We've also learned how to deal with sucking chest wounds.
True
I'm
story.
qualified. If there's any sucking chest wound right now and we
got
got
you
saran wrap, I can take care of you.
There's
A kid, dyslexic.
dyslexia, that's what it's, see, we can't remember dyslexia. So that's why we need training. We have to now take online dyslexia training. So we don't get anything for any of these things, and some of them we have to pay for. And they're required, so there you go. That's a fun thing.
Other questions? Yeah.
Well, speaking about training, what about child abuse and neglect?
Yeah, we have a child abuse and neglect class that everybody has to pass before. We also, most curriculums have a fairly large, about children with needs, and that includes everything from child abuse and neglect. I was actually having a conversation with my child on the way home today. She asked me a question about a friend who she was worried about. And I told her that as a mom, it's my one responsibility, but as a teacher, I'm a mandated reporter. If I think a kid is in danger of self-harm, is at risk, is being injured at home, is being neglected at home, I can't just think about it, I have to do something about it. I have to report it. And typically my job is to report it to counseling, and then counseling gets to carry the heavy burden. But sometimes you're the only one that's actually still looking at these kids. Sometimes these kids are so neglected in terms, I mean, our school's fairly decent, but there are some kids, a lot of what I would consider sort of the passive abuse, where it's more neglect, that these kids are just flying under everybody's radar. They're not getting the help that they need. Sometimes they're kids with severe learning disabilities whose parents are insisting they're just fine. They don't need any help. So we have to be aware of that, and we have some very specific requirements with what we have to do. Yeah.
Well, it does vary from school system to school
Yep.
system, because for MCPS, you know, you're basically the employer, right?
Yeah.
Pass it on.
Oh,
You have to.
We're not,
let
yeah,
them know.
if we can do that, but it's usually, and that's in the case of it's very clear, like, I had a kid cutting herself in here, and that was, you know, it's a little different. Usually, we talk to the counselors, but if the counselors aren't doing something right then, yeah, we still, even though we pass it to the counselors, if the counselors don't do anything about it, it's still on us. Anything else?
You guys, I really would like to leave you with this. This is a fabulous job. My husband was a Marine, and I knew a couple of things. First of all, sorry, if anything happened to him, I can take care of my kids. And second, no matter where he's asked to go, I can have a job if I want one, because this job is everywhere and it's in high demand. And I work hard to make sure I do a good enough job.
Yeah, I switched because I love my job as an engineer, but I was teaching for a while at the University of Nebraska at Lincoln. I was working on my doctorate in engineering before the Air Force told us to move, and then I was teaching engineering economy. You don't make any connection with these kids. There's a room of 100 kids. They may yell at you if they forgot to turn something in and they want to know if you'll sell it. But you know, you're making no connection. You're showing them what to do, but you're not changing what they're going to do. I make kids' lives different, and my worst day teaching is better than my best day as an engineer. I would never go back. At one point in time, had a child trying to lasso my ear with a loop of string on our meter stick today. Still, best job I've ever had. I get kids, they're not allowed to be my Facebook friend until they graduate, right? Bad idea to have direct contact with the children. During graduation last year, my phone started vibrating, and during graduation, they're sending me friend requests. I make a difference. I get kids on paths they didn't even know were there.
She just took them on a college visit. She went with them for the weekend to an engineering presentation for girls, because we're trying to promote STEM, especially for girls. We're an underserved group. And how many did you take?
I took 6 children, 6 girls, 6 teenage girls. I got 3 hotel rooms. I'm not telling you who paid for it. It's me. And we went to Virginia Tech, and they had a great time. And a couple of them said, you know, interesting, but probably not where I want to go, which is better to know now than after their parents have spent how much, you know, sending them to the first year. But, and then, you know, my kid is math brainiac, annoying kid, so she wanted to go too. But, you know, all this stuff, they get so worked up, and they want to know so much. What should they do? What am I supposed to do with my life? It's like, I don't know, what do you want to do? And I think sometimes parents are like, you have to decide. You have to know right now. What are you going to do for the rest of your life? It's like, no, you don't. You have to figure out what you want to do next. What is your next step to be the person you want to be? And maybe you'll do what I did, and good years down the road, just say, well, you know, that was interesting. I really like that, but what's my next step now? I have been a pizza delivery, a cocktail waitress, a hostess. I have worked in all sorts of industries. I have done so many stupid jobs that I don't even want. I've been a movie extra, for crying out loud. I've had the world's stupidest career, but it's been great. Because every single thing I've done has made me a better me now. And these kids, you can show them that there's nothing you could do now that's going to be so, you failed a semester. Nah, we'll figure it out. I mean, I won't tell you what I got in physics in high school. One quarter, it might have been a D. But I pulled it out by the end of the year. I had to be in that class by the time I went to college and figured out that thermodynamics is hard, but survived it. And now I look at it and go, how come that was so hard? It's because you have to learn how to learn. I'm smarter now as an adult because I'm not, well, no, I'm still the glittery, shiny thing you've met. It's like, oh, what, squirrel? But I know what I know how to learn. And if I don't teach a kid a thing, but I teach them how to do a thing, then it's made it worthwhile.